Give everyone one more minute and then we'll get started. Who wants to kick us off with stand up? What are some things that we learned yesterday?
How to implement project management techniques into the actual code.
Awesome. What else? Bueller. Anyone?
Latonya said
they're in the chat, a lot of them.
Latonya said more console uses, and Alina said we made a to-do list.
Cool. Any questions from yesterday? Anyone try some of the code, get stuck anywhere? Anything that you've seen in the news that you have questions about? Opening the floor up for anything.
Actually, it's bad of me, but I think it's a little funny that Bill Gates is getting divorced.
I think they've done some incredible things through their foundation, and it sounds like they're going to continue working at the foundation together. So I'm hopeful for the world that the marriage ending will not end the impact of his money, but
I don't think so from what I have read so far. And I think she had a lot to do with that in the beginning from what I read. Like they sort of came to that revelation together when they went on, I think it was a trip to South Africa. And they were like, you know what, we should make this foundation and go that route.
difference between array and object. Good question. That will be coming later tonight. So we'll dive into that. We're actually going to start with an array tonight and then transform it into an object. But basically, the way you can think about it is an array is just a list. An array can have any data type in it. So it could have strings in it, it could have numbers in it, it could have whatever you wanted in it. It is common that when you have an array, they are all the same data type, but it is not a requirement of the language. So an array may be something like letter grades, right? And you could have A, B, C, D, S, and that would be an array of strings. The reason we use arrays a lot is because we can iterate over them. Which means that we can go through the array and go and look at each piece of it as we're working on it. So computers, very, very bad at doing multiple things at once. And so what we can do with an array is store everything in a list. And then once we have it in the list, we can say, hey, give me each list item one at a time. And so I believe Gus went over map and using a for of or using a for let I equal whatever. Those are all ways of iterating or looping over an array. An object is
Max,
yep.
Sorry, I just Dominique's having issues hearing. Is anybody else having issues hearing Max? No.
Okay. Dominique, it might be worth rebooting the whole computer and seeing if that helps at all. So an object is a way to group information together. So we will objects always are stored using key value pairs in JavaScript. Objects are heavily used in JavaScript. They do have different names in different programming languages, but the point of an object is to store several pieces of information together, and then you use the keys to differentiate that out. So tonight, what we're going to do is we're going to start with our to-do list items as strings in an array. And we're going to display that information and iterate over the array and get all of that information to show up. But as we start working on it, we're going to find that there's more and more information that we want to store with each to-do list item, right? So it's not just the name of the item. We may want to store when we checked it off as complete, or we may want to store some additional notes about that item, or we may want, more information layered in there. So what we will do is we will update our array to, instead of the array storing strings, they're going to store objects, and those objects will have strings in the object. But what that will allow us to do is store more information about that. And then we can kind of deconstruct that object to get that to show up in the HTML. So objects are something that are kind of your worst enemy until suddenly they're not, and then all of a sudden you don't hate them anymore. But the interesting thing with objects and arrays are that you can nest one inside the other. So you could have an array that has 5 objects in it, and in that object could have a key that has the value of another array, and that array could have more objects in it. So you can have arrays and arrays, you can have objects and arrays, you can have arrays and objects, you can do all kinds of any level of nesting. There is a good free code camp exercise that helps you drill down on that data. But nested data is very common to see, especially in JavaScript, of when you want to dive down and go, okay, my school is a whole object, but in that school, there are teachers, but there are multiple teachers, so that will be an array of teachers. But the teachers all have students, so each teacher becomes an object, and then we put an array of students inside the teacher object. Okay, now we list out all of our students there, but all of those students have grades. So student becomes an object, and then we store student name and that kind of information as well. So if you guys are still struggling or have more questions about objects and arrays at the end of the night, I can go over a example outside of the to-do list app, where we can talk about why we're nesting data, how to tell the difference between an array and an object, what the keys are, what the array is, all of that kind of fun stuff. Did I miss other questions in the chat?
I don't think so.
Okay, are there any more questions before we dive into back to the to-do list? Okay. What's the first step?
Check our to-do list.
Check the to-do list. Exactly. Actually, my first step is to share my screen, which I am infamously bad at doing. Okay. So I am going to go to my Google Docs. And I am going to pull up our to-do list app. Okay, so let's review. Yesterday, we got our HTML files set up. We created our CSS and JS. We got them linked together. We tested those links and made sure our CSS was working and our JavaScript was working. We got some dummy data loaded into HTML so we could see the list items. We got the input button and the HTML working. And we made it so that when you put that input value in, we were able to retrieve that from JavaScript, right? So to review what that looks like, I'm going to go to my VS Code, and I'm going to right-click, open with, no, that always hates me. I'm going to right-click, reveal with Finder, and I'm going to pop open index.html, and I will blow this up before you guys ask. And I will blow this up as well. Okay, so what we got working last night, and there was good feedback. Thank you guys for filling out that feedback form last night of trying to split my screen. So we've got JavaScript on the bottom, if it's not going to fight me. And our, come on. There we go. And our HTML at the top. So if you guys are looking, you can grab any tab up at the top and just drag it like I did with a little resistance to a pane, and then you can just adjust where that's showing up. So anything on the bottom of my screen here is going to be JavaScript, and then anything at the top of the screen will be HTML. We will see how much I fight having that split out. But okay, so let's review. We've got our HTML. We added a form here, and we linked our JavaScript together, right? So we said on submission of the form, on submit, look for add new task in your JavaScript. So it goes, oh, function, add new task. Those are linked together. And then in our HTML, we said, hey, pass in this parameter called event, because we want to play with something in the browser directly. So what do? We go, and when the form is submitted, we say, hey, event that came in from our HTML through our parameter, don't refresh the page. We're going to do some interactivity here. We know you're trying to help. We don't want your help. Don't do that. Then we go and we say, hey, const form field. Now, form field doesn't have anything in it until we say document.getElementById. Document here means our HTML document. So our HTML document, it's going, all right, what would you like? We would like to get an element by ID. Okay, now it needs to know what element it's getting. So it says new task field. Okay, so we go up here, we look for new task field. It's the ID. So after all of this, we take the result of the document.getElementById and we shove it in this variable called form field, right? And so form field, now, whenever I reference form field, it is doing the equivalent of document.getElementById. And so all we do is we console log out the form field dot value. And value is one of those special things that just comes with anything that we grab from our HTML. So the end result of last night was that we pop open the console. I can type in test and hit add to do, and test shows up in our console. So pausing there, giving anyone an opportunity to ask questions about anything so far. Okay, so let's go back to our to-do list, and our to-do list says use JavaScript to save the element. Okay, so now we've got to go to our JavaScript and start working with a data structure. Now I've already said how we're going to save this, but what kind of data structure do you think we are going to use to save that text in?
An array.
An array, right? And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to say up at the top, now we're going to be modifying this array, right? We're going to be adding things to it, removing it. So what kind of variable are we going to use?
Let.
You guys got it. So we're going to say let, and then we'll say to-do list. And that is going to equal an empty array, right? Before we can start adding things to this, we've got to create the array before we can shove things in it. So down here, what we are going to do is we are going to say add, we're going to say to-do list dot, and what's the method that we use to add something into an array? To the end of the array, I should say. Push. And we are going to push in our form field dot value. All right, so let's save that. Let's go over here. We're going to come over here. I'm going to refresh. I'll type in ABC. and it console logs out, but it doesn't do anything. It's not showing up here. It's not in my console. It's not doing anything. Why not?
Do you have to call to do,
So
console
you're-
log to do?
Yep, exactly. We have to console log our to-do list, right? All we did is we added it to the array, but the array isn't linked to anything. The array is like, great, I'm saving that information now. What do you want me to do with it? So if we come over here and refresh, now I can type in ABC, and you notice this array comes out, right? We know it's an array because it's in the square brackets, not the curly brackets. Curly brackets or braces are always used for objects in JavaScript, and square brackets are always used for arrays. So now we've got our array showing up here, but we've got work to do to get it to show up in this HTML, right? But let's prove our array is working. I'm going to change this text and type in DEF and hit add to do. And now our console is showing, hey, there are now two things in your array, something called ABC and something called DEF. All right, so now we've got that data structure working, but it's not in our HTML. So before we keep going, we're going to go back to our to-do list. And hey, we finished our use.js to save the element, right? Those elements are saved in our JavaScript. And we can prove that because ABC is still showing up in the console. So all we have to do is now sync our JavaScript up to our HTML to get that information to show up, right? So I'm going to cross off use.js to save the element because we have that working. We push it into our array is good to go. So I'm going to cross that off. Okay. Update our HTML to show to-dos in the list. So this is something that we're probably going to want to do over and over again, right? We're going to want to frequently call this thing that is going to say, hey, JavaScript, take this array and go update the HTML. So because of that, how do we want to do that in our JavaScript?
Const?
Not a const. We want it to be in a function, right? There's this block of code that we're going to be calling over and over again. And so because of that, we want to group it together. So we're going to create a new function here, and we're going to call that function update HTML. Okay. And what that's going to do is it's going to say, all right, take everything in that array and get it into our HTML. But in order to do that, we have to access that HTML, right? So how are we going to do that? How did we do that up here? What line did we use to kind of reach into the HTML?
The ID?
Line 6. Yeah, document.get element by ID. Exactly. So we have new task field here. So we have to come up here. And in here, we are going to give this an ID. And the ID will say is list. Okay. So now we come down to our update HTML. And I'm going to say const list equals document dot get element by ID. And I will say list. Okay. And from here, I can even console.log out my list to make sure we've got that connection working. So I'm going to make sure I save both files because we did add that ID up there. I'm going to come down here. I'm going to refresh. I'm going to type in DEF and ABC. And all right, my array is working and we still see things getting added to it. But I don't see my list anywhere. Why don't I have my list? Not a return because I have my console log list in here and that isn't even running. So we don't have to return anything from that function, but this console log should be running. Why isn't it? Call the function. Shaw, you got it. We said, hey, there's this function update HTML coming, and here's what you should do when update HTML is called. But we never called it. We never told the computer, hey, go run update HTML. We just told the computer what to do when we said update HTML. So I'm going to come up here. I'm going to remove our console logs just to keep this a little cleaner. And once we push it into the array, I'm going to call update HTML. So now when the add new task gets called, it's going to do whatever it needs to do to update the array. And then it's also going to say, hey, go run update HTML. Well, it knows what update HTML is because we just defined it right here. And so now it's going to go, oh, okay, now you want me to go get the list. Now you want me to console log out the list. Okay. So I'm going to come over here. I'm going to refresh. I'm going to type in ABC. I'm going to add to do. And notice our UL came out, our UL ID list, right? So now we can start working with that. So I am a little rusty on this because I use React at work, and you guys are going to love React when we get there. But I believe what we can do is say list.inner HTML, right? And what that is saying is it's saying, what would you like the inner HTML to be inside your list? So I'm going to say we will make that an LI. And because it's a string, we have to use either quotes or we're going to use backticks here. And you'll see why we're going to use backticks in a second. So I'm going to just type in the word test. And because I'm not sure if this code is going to work right, I'm going to come over here. I'm going to refresh. I'm going to type in ABC. And I click add to do, and boom, we've got test showing up. Now, test isn't our list, right? We didn't type in the word test, but what we did is we confirmed that we can reach into our HTML from our JavaScript. We can set it to some new value, right, in our HTML, and then we can pass that in. So I'm going to pause there. Make sure you guys, if you have any questions about any of those lines, let me know. I'm seeing head movement, so I'm going to give you guys a couple more minutes. See Latonia cursing out the computer over there. We good to move on?
Could you show what the result was again? I just want to double check.
Yep. So basically what happens is whenever this is what we started off with, and whenever we type in something and hit add to do, we've got test showing up now.
Okay, I was a little confused before. You had the ABC with the D, E, F.
We will get to that next.
I wasn't sure if I was supposed to still have all that stuff. Thank you.
Yep.
And do you have the one function linking to the other in the JS?
I sure do.
You have it in there because we need it to return from the one thing to the other. Is that why?
Yeah, no. So we could totally move this right up to here.
Yep.
And save that and come over here and refresh and click the button, and it still does the exact same thing. I know that we are going to want to call update HTML in other places as well. And so because I'm thinking ahead and thinking, oh, I probably am going to need to update the HTML when we edit an item or when we delete an item or what, right? I'm proactively moving that into a separate function so we can call that function in other places.
Because otherwise you couldn't if it was inside of there? it would only
Correct.
work with that? Okay,
Correct. So otherwise you would just copy and paste these 3 lines whenever you wanted to update your HTML. But that is breaking the dry rule, the DRY, don't repeat yourself, right?
Mhm.
And this is actually going to get more complicated because we're going to start working with the array. And so because of that, we are putting it in its own separate function so we can build more reusable, more module code.
Right. So each thing is its separate thing, basically. They're our own little blocks.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. And we know it's a block because it's starting with curly brace and ending with a curly brace.
Yeah.
And so whenever we call update HTML, we know that it's going to run these 3 lines.
Okay.
And by the way, when I say call or execute, that just means update HTML with the parentheses. That is telling JavaScript, hey, I would like you to go execute my function now.
It doesn't like the brackets around the list item in my line 13 there, or you've got yours on a different line, but
14, the inner HTML.
14, yeah.
So do you have backticks or quotes or a single quote?
Oh, I couldn't see those. Thank you.
Yep. And again, this is a spot where I know we're going to get fancier here, so I use backticks in advance. But if you wanted to use single quotes or double quotes, those would work right now fine.
Okay, what I'm writing isn't showing up in the HTML. Like when I put it after I press the button, it's not showing up on the page.
Does it change the existing list to something?
In the console?
No, in the actual HTML. So when you click
No.
the button, the HTML stays exactly the same.
Yes.
Okay, go ahead and share your screen.
There it is. Um, this is what I had. This is what I'm writing. Nothing.
Okay, so the good news is that it is consoling out the list. So we know that that code is running, right? The update HTML is running. Go back to your browser. Nothing is jumping out at me. Make sure you refresh the page.
No, that's not it, is it?
Aha.
It was. No. All right, thank you.
So the good news, I know I'm talking up React a lot, but React has something called hot reload built into it, which means whenever you change your code, it automatically refreshes the page in the browser. It is something that when I am teaching, it is very hard to remember to do that. And you'll be staring at the code and being like, all the code is perfect. I just copied and pasted it over. I don't know what's wrong. And sometimes it's as simple as the refresh. So definitely a trap I have fallen into before. Okay, so we now have this update HTML going, right? And we have our array up here that has our data in it. But what did we say about computers? Computers are really only good at doing one thing at a time, right? So let's get a little crazy here. Let's say list.innerHTML equals to-do list, right? It's an array. Let's just shove it in there and see what happens. All right, so I come over here, I refresh, I type in test.
Max, could you share your screen?
Thank you for the reminder. So we've got test showing up here. Okay, it kind of did what I wanted. Let's type in ABC and add. Oh, that doesn't look particularly good, but you know what? It is showing up. We want to get fancier than that, right? We want to tell it, hey, we want some formatting around that, or hey, we would like to add more than just the words that are showing up. So we're going to go back to our VS Code, and instead of just setting it to this to-do list, we're going to go through 2 different examples. The first one is we are going to use, no, we're just going to go through one example. We are going to come down here and we're going to say let, and we're going to create this string. and we're going to call it HTML to update, right? And we'll make it equal to an empty string. Then what we're going to do is we want to loop over each item so we can do something with each item in the list. So we're going to say for, and we are going to say const list item of to-do list. And then in that loop, we are going to say HTML to update, and then we are going to use a plus and an equal. What we're doing is we're saying add this to this HTML. And what are we going to add? We are going to add a list item, but inside that list item, we are going to say list item. Now, instead of saying list.innerHTML, we are going to say list.innerHTML equals HTML to update. I will go through that code one more time, but just to show you guys the result, I'm going to come over here. I'm going to refresh. We've got our three things in here from our first HTML. I'm going to type in ABC and click add to do. And there it is. And I'm going to type in DEF and add to do. And there it is. So I will go back to the code. So again, let's go through this one more time. We've got the document get element ID list. We understand that. We're going out to the HTML. We're pulling that in so we can interact with it. Now down here, we're saying let HTML to update equal an empty string. That's something that we're going to add into, right? We're going to just say, I would like this placeholder so I can update it as I'm looping through it. Okay, now we come into a for loop, right? And the for loop needs the list that we're going over. So it's breaking out the list for us into individual items that are in the list. So now instead of having ABC and DEF that are all lumped together, what the for loop is doing down here is it's saying, hey, break out the list into this variable called list item. So now the first time that this loop runs, let's say our array is to-do list equals ABC and DEF. Okay, so the first time this for loop runs, it goes to-do list. Okay, to-do list is up here. What's the first item in the list? It is ABC. Okay, so now list item is equal to ABC. So now it says, what would you like me to do? Take HTML to update and add to it, that's the plus equals, a list item, the LI. And what would you like the list item to be? Oh, that's referencing this const list item. And we know that list item, the first time this loop runs, is equal to ABC. Then it comes down, it hits this bracket, and it goes, okay, that's all that I'm doing for the first loop. Now let me come back up here and run this a second time. Now list item is equal to DEF. Okay, DEF, what do you want to do? Oh, add that. Don't overwrite what HTML to update already is. Add in list item and then the variable.
Excuse me, Max. This is Latonia. You someone asked this before, I think maybe Susan, but how you explain why you use list item? Like, is it just regular terminology that we know that we're using list item when we go to okay.
So this is probably a good example of a bad variable name. And so while I'm explaining this, I'm saying list item here, right? List item, list item, list item. But I'm also saying list item here. And those are two different things, right? This is the HTML tag that is just telling it, hey, I would like a bulleted list, right? The UL in the LI. This is list item probably isn't a good variable name because I'm doing an LI and a list item. So instead, let's rename this. Let's call this to-do list or to-do task. Now we can call that whatever we want, but we want to be descriptive. It's like, okay, we know we're going over the to-do list. What is coming out of that to-do list? It's a single to-do task that is coming out of that to-do list. So name that appropriately and then update that in your loop.
Can you explain of a little bit? That just is pointing to the individual items within the array, or?
Correct. Yeah. So this is a for of loop, which means it is just pulling every item out of the list and
Right.
storing it in to do task. So the other two ways you could do this are with a dot map, or you could also do it with a for let I equals 0.
Okay.
So let me show you those
The first time we
variations.
saw that of, we were using the other two ways before, so. Good.
Yep. So for of loops are a newer JavaScript construct. They were not in the original JavaScript. I think that that's the easiest thing to understand, because you're basically saying, okay, of this list, give me every item in it. So I like for of loops the most. But just so you have an idea of how this is working, we can also comment that out and say to do list dot map. And there are definitely times I will use a map, but I normally only use the map when I want an array as the result. With that said, it does the same thing. So I could say to do task. And in my to do task, I am going to HTML to update plus equals the, then I'm just going to copy all of this. And I'm going to save that and come over to Chrome and refresh and type in ABC and get ABC DEF. If I refresh ABC, oh, hold on. Like, where's the other one coming from? Delete that out. Now we'll get back to normal. Okay, ABC and DEF, right? And so the map is working the exact same way. And then the other way you could do it is you could say for, and remember what I said, I never use single variable names. For I equals 0 is a standard that drives me crazy. Just name whatever I is. So what we're going to do is we're going to call that to do task index. And we're going to set that equal to 0. And then we will say while to do task index is less than to do list dot length. And then we will say I++. And now we get into an interesting situation here, because if we just console.log out to do task index and refresh and go here and click and not have a typo, sorry, I did that wrong. It's for let to do task index equals 0, because that's where the loop is always going to start. Then you want to tell it how long the loop is going to run. And so you're saying make sure the index is less than the number of items in the list, the length of the list. And then finally increment the index once every time you go over this array. So now we come down here, we refresh, we type in ABC, and what we get is 0. And then if we do DEF, we're going to get 0 and 1, right? So all it's doing is giving us that 0 or that 1 number. So then what we need to do is access that. So we're going to say HTML to update plus equals. Now we have to say go to the to-do list, the array, and pass in the to-do task index. And while we're doing all of that, we also need the LI to surround it. So now if I come back over here, I refresh, I type in ABC, we get ABC. And if I type in DEF, I get DEF. So what we're doing here is, and this is a very common thing, we are accessing the specific item in the array by this index. Right. So if we wanted to access information directly, we could say console.log outside of the loop. to-do list, and then we're going to do a square bracket and say 0. And so what that's going to do is every time the function runs, it is going to return out the first element in the array. Now, why is it 0 and not 1? Because arrays are 0 indexed. So 0 does not mean nothing. 0 means the first element in the array is 0. So the second element in the array is actually going to be 1. So if we come over here, we refresh, we type in ABC, we are going to save and refresh. And now when we type in ABC, we're going to see ABC come out. But now when we say DEF, we're still going to get ABC because we're referencing always the first element and in that array. So I'm going to remove that. I'm going to pull this up. Understanding all 3 of these loops, even though you wouldn't necessarily, they all have their different uses, but understanding all 3 loops and how they are working is very important. So if anyone has questions on any of these loops, feel free to shout it out. I can definitely put that in the Slack channel. So I'm going to comment these out just because we only need one of them. But if anyone has questions, feel free to shout them out.
Max, this is Latonia. I have a question that's more, if it's not aligned with what we're doing right now, I can wait. But everything that I remember reading said not to use inner HTML.
Did they say what to use instead?
No, they just said that it opens up the language or the activities to like hacks and stuff like that. So
yeah, the concern there is that you'll see scammers on Facebook say like, oh, just copy and paste this information into your console and look at the cool thing Facebook does. And you're like, okay, and you copy and paste it in, and like the page rotates 180 degrees, and you're like, oh, well, that was dumb. Well, yeah, it rotated the page 180 degrees, but it also took all of the information on your Facebook and uploaded it to some hacker. So inner HTML can be insecure. We are using it in a very limited set right now. We know exactly what information we're putting into the page. So it's less of a concern. React uses something called state, which automatically syncs the information showing up in your HTML with the data structure that you are storing in the state. So when we get to React, you won't be using inner HTML at all. State is basically a special kind of variable that automatically updates your HTML whenever you put information into it. So state is, it can be a string, it can be an object, it can be an array, but it's state is a special concept in React in particular, and other newer frameworks also use state to intersync your HTML and your object. So basically, you wouldn't have to call this update HTML function at all. You just update the state, the variable, and it automatically shows up in your HTML. So really cool stuff that you can do with that. But we are covering more of the traditional way of making JavaScript update your HTML. This is also very much the way jQuery would interact with your page. So jQuery is now thankfully being replaced with React and Angular, and a third one called Vue, V-U-E. However, because it is getting phased out, that's why we're not teaching jQuery and just using the things built into what is called vanilla JavaScript. So using document.getElement by ID or whatever it is to get our JavaScript to interact with the HTML. Okay, other questions here. So just to give a little bit more clarity, instead of console logging out our list, I'm going to console log out our HTML to update. And so if I come over here and I refresh and I type in ABC and I type in DEF and I add it, you notice what's coming out here is just our LIs. And what it's doing is it's adding that LI over and over again. So we're basically constructing our HTML together, and that's what's going out onto the page. So another way to write this is kind of a shorthand. Oops. You could also write this as HTML to update equals HTML to update plus the new LI tag, right? We're basically just concatenating this string. We're keep on throwing on another LI, another LI, another LI. So we're going over our to-do list. We're pulling each task out, which is going to be a string. And then we are putting that task with LI tags on either side of it. We're adding that to this HTML to update that we're keeping on adding to. And then at the end, we set that into our list that we pulled out from our document. How are we feeling?
I'm gonna need to like watch the video and sit down and practice it more, because I'm getting parts of it and missing parts as far as really getting what it's really about in one solid picture. But you're doing a great job of explaining it, of course. I'm just still trying to, I got behind on some of the JavaScript stuff. And so some of it I'm still going, I don't quite understand that. But you're helping me put the pieces, but I need to go play with it to really, do. So that's all.
Got it. Out
Yeah,
of
I
curiosity,
agree. Oh, I'm sorry,
ahead.
Max.
No,
I was
go
just
ahead.
gonna say that I feel like the same way Carolyn, but I just feel like I'm struggling with knowing like, okay, you wrote this and now you need to translate that into this wording for this piece of it, like just pulling that stuff together.
Yeah, so sometimes it helps like to go back to our list and saying, okay, what are we doing? We've got to update our HTML to show our to-dos in a list, right? And so breaking that down and being like, okay, we've got to get it in our HTML. So what's the one thing that I have to remember about the HTML? All right, there's something with document.getElement by ID, right? Like those are that's the interface between our HTML and our JavaScript. Okay, that's done. All right, we'll come back to the HTML. I just know that I grabbed a hold of it and I'm going to do something with it next. Okay, now get our items to show up that are in the list. All right, well, it's a list. I want to do something to each item in the list. So in order to do that, I need to loop over the list so I can get access to each individual item. So, okay, now let me go do my for loop. So we get our for loop written. And even you can break down the for loop. Okay, what are the two parts of a loop? One is the thing I'm looping over, and the other thing is the part that I'm pulling out, right? So, okay, now I can break down my for, it's a new variable that I'm creating, so call it a const. What am I pulling out of the list? Okay, I am pulling out the to-do task. Okay, and what's this list? This list is coming from to-do list. And what's the thing happening inside the loop? Okay, that's why we're going to do our curly braces. Okay, we got through the loop. Now, what's the point? What are we trying to do in that loop? All right, well, we're pulling out the individual items, but each item, in order for it to show up right in our HTML, needs the LI tags around it. And so what we're doing is we're saying, hey, build this string out with the LI tags around it and add it to the HTML to update that we already have. Okay, do we need to do anything else in that loop? Nope, that's it. We just looped over it, and what's the result? And so it is very helpful before you even get down to this inner HTML to be like, all right, what's HTML to update? Or if you're even struggling with the list, be like, okay, just console log out my to-do task. What is to-do task? What's this loop filling in? So if we save that, and I just comment that out for now, oops. If I type in ABC, I see ABC come out. And if I type in DEF, I get ABC and DEF. right? And if I type in 1, 2, 3, I'm going to get A, B, C, D, E, F, 1, 2, 3, right? So all this loop is doing is deconstructing my list into individual items. And then all we do is we can take a look at that list of things that came out, right? And it's our LIs with the list items inside of them. And then finally, all we're doing is saying, hey, that HTML JavaScript bridge that we created, take that list of the list items in it that are all the individual LI tags and pass it in to our inner HTML. And we can even go in the browser now and inspect and actually see our UL list and see our list items with ABC and DEF in them. So let me take a break here. Do you guys want to try this for 10 minutes and see how far you're getting, or would you rather me push on?
Carolyn had a question in the chat.
Actually, I have a follow-up. Ignore the first one. Sorry.
Yes, you're more correct on the second question, Carolyn. Is you can use a loop to go over a list, but a list does not inherently mean a loop.
And I vote for practice.
Okay.
Is it in the Slack?
It is in Slack, and I'm gonna leave up this on. Let me see if I can fit it all on my screen.
It's okay.
just
I'll look in Slack.
the UL
easy.
list. Okay. So let's take, I don't want to call it a 10-minute break, but try working on this until 6:35. And if you guys are stuck or have questions, feel free to throw them out in the chat.
Thanks, Max.
Excuse me, Max. Can you share the link to that Google Doc again? I apologize. I was just looking for it and I can't see it in Slack. The one you shared yesterday. Yeah, the list. Thank you.
So Susan, great question. Why is to-do task a const here? It's due to the way that because the loop is going over it, it would kind of be like setting the const in here. Because it gets reset every time the loop runs, it is okay to make that a const. However, you could also make it a let and it wouldn't cause any problems. So it's kind of a technicality of why it's a const. It's just a const because the loop is overwriting it every time. So an overwrite and a change aren't the same thing. Think of it as, let me reword that. Every time the loop runs, instead of it getting overwritten, it's deleting the old one and then recreating it. And so that's why you're allowed to use a const there. Now, if I did something like to do task equals over or equals max, right? That's going to yell at me, right? Because now I am changing the to-do list task. But I could make this a let, and then it would be fine to do that.
So it's like it's like a new thing every time. That's why it can be constant, because it's running every single time. It's like a fresh. Okay.
Exactly. Yes. Now, but like I
Because it's a
said,
for, because it's this specific thing, a for loop?
yes.
Okay.
Scroll up to line 7 on JS. So what we're doing up here is once we get the form field and we grab the value of the form field, we add it to our list, which our list is all the way up here at the top. And then we update our HTML, which is calling this function. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just move this up so we don't forget about it. And now we should be able to see more on the screen.
So is that what a for loop always is? I guess I don't know if I just said this, but it's a for in any situation gonna always be a refresh, or is it only in this thing we're doing here? I don't know if I'm asking this right.
I wouldn't worry too much over the fact that it's a const. Yes, you can think of a loop as always starting fresh. Whenever it reaches the end, it comes back up to the top and it's going to be fresh, right? So a good way to show that is let's go down to this for loop type 3. Now, if I say in here, I say like let counter equal 0, right? And I say console log counter, and then I also console log out our to-do task index. And then I'm going to put a label on these. So I'm going to say to-do task index. And then I'll say counter. Okay, so now if I okay, so this is outside of the loop, right? This to-do task index. And so because we're adding to it 1 every time, this we're going to see is 0, 1, 2. But because let counter is inside the loop, it is going to get reset every time we hit this bottom curly brace and come back up to the top. Counter is now going to be reset to 0. So even though this block of code is going to run 3 times, all 3 times counter is going to be 0. And so if I hit add to do, we see counter 0, and then our index is 0. Then we see counter 0 again, and our to-do task index is 1. And then we see counter 0 again, and our to-do task index is 2. And the reasoning behind that is every time we run what's in this code, it is resetting it back to the beginning. So if we wanted to keep track of something like a counter, which is a common thing to do, we could take this let counter equal 0 and put it outside of the loop. And now the loop is only resetting kind of what's inside of it. It's not going to reset what is outside of it. And that principle of what is it doing, where does it reset, is called scope. And so now if we come back in here and we refresh, and I add A, B, C, and D, E, F, and clear my console. Now when I add 1, 2, 3, it's going to show me, it's going to make a liar out of me and not do it. Oh, because I didn't increment it. Counter plus plus, which is the same thing as saying counter plus equals 1, or the same thing as saying counter equals counter plus 1, however you want to think of that. So now if I refresh and do A, B, C, and D, E, F, and then clear that, and then say 1, 2, 3. Now it's going to show me counter 1, counter 2, counter 3. Does that help understand scope or the reset?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. So I'm going to comment all of this back out. And go back up to here. Alina, do you want to screen share?
No, it's fine. I just need the bottom of JavaScript code. If you could scroll down to the bottom, I think.
So everything's commented out down here. So all you need is what is on the screen. Minus
so
the
what
last
was
final.
in Slack. Because I'm missing something. Because when I go to I can screen share if you want.
Yeah, let me. Okay, go for it. Everything looks good there at the first glance, and you're calling update HTML. So let's go in, pop open your console for me. Console in Safari. If you just right click and go down to inspect anywhere in that white space. Oh, you don't have an inspect. If you go to Safari and preferences up at the top, there is a advanced menu in the top right. And then there is show develop menu in menu bar all the way at the bottom. Okay, and now you should be able to close that window. Yep, and now right click, and now you can get to inspect. And go to your console. Yeah, you got it. Okay, now try and type something in and click on add to do. Okay, so we have a unexpected token curly brace, expected property after name, and that's on line 17. So let's go to line 17 in your script.js. And all the way up at the top, we've got that there because we've got to-do list with a hanging period and nothing going on there. So if we put that curly brace back, because you actually wanted that there, it was the line above the to-do list dot that has you hanging. So just delete that out. And save and refresh. Okay, different error, but what do I say about different errors? We celebrate different errors. So can't find variable to-do list, and that's on line 7. So if we click in and we say to-do list.push, what's going on with that list, that list? Okay, save that and go back and refresh. And okay, cannot access uninitialized variables, still on line 7. So what uninitialized is it's saying what is to-do list. So if we go all the way up to the top of your code, we reference to-do list, but it's all the way down on line 20 where we say, hey, to-do list, you're going to be a new empty array. And the other thing that we have going on here is we've got 2 functions called add new task, and that is going to confuse the browser. So what we're going to do is we're going to delete out lines 1 through 7. And then scroll down just a little bit and let's make sure you also have 2 update HTMLs.
Oh my gosh, I was talking to myself the whole time. Sorry. I didn't realize that I was on mute.
So we also have 2 update HTMLs going on there. So I think you also want to delete out Yeah, go back to your code.
That's the current error that I'm getting.
Go back to your code. We have two things called we have two functions. I think when you copied and pasted, you copied and pasted in addition instead of overwriting.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I
can't
can hear you.
guys.
It's you guys can hear me, right?
Hello.
Someone else can hear me. Okay.
Wait, what were you saying?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. You have, if you go back to your code, you have two functions also called update HTML. And so what I think happened is you copied and pasted it from Slack, but you copied and pasted it in addition to instead of overwriting the code that you had.
Okay.
So basically the first line of your JavaScript should start with let to-do list equals, and then it should be the function add new task in that code, and then the function update HTML in that code.
Okay. Thank you. I think I got it. Let's try.
Still
I'm
an error?
getting the same error, yeah.
Go ahead and share your screen again.
Okay.
Okay, null is not an object evaluating list.inner HTML. Okay, so let's go back to your code. And that is on line 28. So let's go down, list inner HTML. Okay, so it's probably having a hard time finding the list. So let's go back up and list document.getElement by ID list. So everything looks right here, but if we go to your index.html, it is looking on your UL tag for an ID that is equal to list. So on line 12, before the closing arrow, space ID equals list. And list should be in quotes. All right, and save that and refresh and type in, yep.
Okay, that's fine.
Good to go.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. Anyone else want to screen share, have questions? Want to celebrate that you got it working? Anyone? All right, how are we feeling? Are we feeling like that was a good breather, that we're ready to push forward? All right, getting lots of thumbs up there. Okay, I'm going to remember to share my screen before you guys remind me. Okay. So we've got it logging out. We've got our HTML showing up. Let's go back to our list. And we can say we have successfully updated our HTML to show our to-dos in the list, right? We've made several times back and forth getting our data structures updated and getting our HTML talking to our JavaScript putting information back into our HTML, right? So we're making really good progress here. So what do we have to do next? Well, first we need to cross off update HTML to show to-dos. Now we have to add a button to prompt for new name. So this is probably a poorly worded task on my part. That is tied to the update the name of the to-do. So I'm going to actually rename this add button to prompt for new name when renaming a task. Okay. And so now we're going to get fancy here. We're going to save this. We're going to come over here and we need to add a button, right? So first of all, whenever I refresh this page, I get my dummy data showing up, right? And then whenever I type something in, it overwrites my dummy data. Well, we probably don't need the dummy data anymore. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to delete this out and I'm just going to add one list item that says no items yet. So now when I come in and I hit refresh, I get no items yet. And I can type in ABC, and then that's going to kick my list off and show it all. So before I add the edit button, I'm going to add one more button that's probably useful. After my add to do button, I am going to add a button underneath the form that says reset. How am I going to link my reset button to my JavaScript?
With an ID? Oh, no.
We could. The ID is more useful for accessing your HTML from your JavaScript, but we want to go the other way around. We want to tell our HTML, go do this thing in the JavaScript. And so the way we did it on the form is with an on submit. But this is a little different because we're not submitting a form, right? This button is kind of standing alone. So instead, we are going to use this thing called on click. And what do we want to do when this button is clicked? I want to call a function called reset to dos. Okay, and where is that function? Well, if I save that and I come back here and I refresh and I click my reset button, it says uncaught reference error. Reset to dos is undefined, is not defined, right? It's like, I don't know. I couldn't find reset to dos anywhere. So we've got to come over here. I'm going to go to the bottom of my script.js and I am going to create a new function called reset to dos. Okay. And I am going, how am I going to reset my to-dos? Where are my to-dos?
Maybe you're resetting the loop.
I'm
You're resetting not your loop, your list.
My list, my array is what I want to reset. So I'm going to say to-do list, right? Which is all the way up here and which we are updating and pushing things into when we add a new task. I'm going to set my to-do list back to empty. Okay, and come in here, I'll refresh. I'm going to type in ABC. I'm going to type in DEF. I'm going to click reset and nothing happens. Anyone have a guess why nothing is happening?
Oh, boy.
Well,
Back to the code for a second.
yeah. We reset our to-do list. So let's dive into that. Let's make sure that that's actually working. Let's console log out our to-do list.
Okay.
So I'm going to come back here. I'm going to refresh. I'll put an ABC. I'll put an DEF. I'm going to click reset. Hey, my list isn't even logging out. So we've got a problem. Let's console log up here. Just the word test to see what's happening. I'm going to refresh. I'm going to type in ABC, type in DEF. I'm going to click reset. Nothing. So we've got an issue somewhere with our button or our function. So we need to figure out what's happening here. So let's look up at our on submit. What do you notice is the difference between our working on submit and our on click that isn't working?
Ah. Do you need event in parentheses?
I do. And
I don't
we aren't
understand why, but it feels right.
Yeah. And so remember what we're doing over here with reset to dos? It's like, okay, you're telling me what to do when you tell me to reset, but you're not actually telling me to do it yet until I add those parentheses. The same thing is happening here. It's like, okay, I understand you want me to reset the to-dos, but I'm not actually going to do that until you put the parentheses after. So now let's test that. I'm going to come back. I'm going to refresh. I'm going to type in ABC. I'm going to type in DEF. I click reset. And now out comes my test. And I'm even getting an empty array. So this is where we pump the brakes and we go, all right, we just fixed something. We didn't fix it completely. It's not doing what we want it to do yet, but it is doing something closer to what I want it to do. And so we got to celebrate that win. So I come back over here. Like my test is working. I can remove that. We updated the list and we confirmed the list is empty. So when is the time that we know that we've updated the list and gotten it to show up in our show up? So the only other code that we have, right? Let's go back up, add new task, and we update the list. But then what's that one final thing we're doing when we add the new task?
Refreshing it.
We update the HTML, right? And so now a light bulb should be going off of, oh, I know why he put that in a function. He was sneaky and he knew that we were going to have to run this all over again. So I'm going to take this line, bring it down here, and add it in after we reset our to-do list to empty. So now I'm going to save. I'm going to come back here. I'm going to refresh. I'm going to type in ABC. I'm going to type in DEF. And as soon as I hit the reset button, there goes the list. And so the reset was as simple as adding the button and linking it to the on-click. Then in our JavaScript, we defined what that on-click function was going to be, and we called it reset to-dos. And it was as simple as emptying out our list, setting it back to an empty list. And then in our update.html, we then come up and look at what's happening here. Hey, get the list from the HTML again, set HTML to update. Now here's a trick. Go get the to-do list. And for each item in the to-do list, oh wait, there isn't anything in the to-do list. The to-do list is empty. So this for loop isn't going to run at all. So what ends up happening, HTML update stays equal to the empty quotes. So now HTML is empty, set the list back to empty, and console log out the empty string just to be safe. So I'm going to remove that one. I'm going to pull this up as far as I can. How are we feeling?
Where did you put event? I missed that.
I didn't actually put the event in here. I just added the parentheses. If you
okay.
If you
That's
did
why I
add
mentioned the errors.
Yeah, if you did add event, it wouldn't hurt anything. The only reason we didn't put it there was because we don't need it in our JavaScript. There's no prevent default that we need to call. And so that's why I'm not passing it in. So I just updated the last message I sent in Slack to have the latest code with it. And I will do the same for the HTML. So now the most two recent messages are where we're up to date.
Okay, I think I have a problem with the order in my JavaScript file. It says reset to-dos is not defined. So I need to put the function higher up maybe in my list of stuff.
Probably not. Go ahead and share your screen and let's take a look.
Okay. Oh, wait a minute. I have to move this over. I can just share desktop too, can't I? Maybe I can do it that way. Does that work?
That works. I just had someone pull up in my driveway, so give me 1 second. Karen might be able to help you out.
Is that too small? Should I make the font bigger?
What's the error that you're getting?
Uncaught reference error, reset to dos is not defined at HTML button element dot on click, and it's on line 19
Okay, so let's
of
go
the
to,
of the index.html. So
Yep.
I would be here. So it's obviously it's going to the JavaScript file, and it doesn't
okay,
know
so
what it is yet.
hold on.
Kyle, you have reset written two different ways. It's a capital
Yeah.
S in HTML, and then it's lowercase for function.
Oh, thank
Right.
you.
And so, yeah,
It's because I'm trying to type too fast, keeping up.
it happens though. It happens. So save it and refresh and see what happens. Let's make sure.
Okay.
You're good to go?
Yep, thank you. That's what it was. How do I end my screen share? Over here. Okay.
Good work. Okay. One more thing I want to do before we get into editing a task. When I add a new thing here, the DEF sticks around. That's kind of annoying, right? We want that to clear out. So what we're going to do is just like we access the value, get element by ID, and then we push in the value. After we get that stored in our array, we can actually set the value. So we can say form field dot value. And what do I want it to equal? I want it to be equal to an empty string. Right. And so again, we're linking our HTML and our JavaScript together here. So now when I refresh the page and type in ABC, ABC clears out. I can type in DEF and that clears out. So it's kind of working both ways, right? We access the form field dot value and read the information that's in it, but we can also set that information to whatever we wanted. So we could type in ABC there, and now whenever we type something in and click add to do, it's going to autofill ABC for us. We can type 1, 2, 3, and it puts ABC back in for us. So we just want to set that equal to an empty string, and then it will clear it out for us. Okay. We are going to get our edit buttons to show up. We're going to link our JavaScript in, and then we will take a break. So I want my button added, but let's look at my code. I just have LI no new items yet. So I can't add it to my HTML, because if I add it to my HTML and refresh, it says no items yet, edit, but as soon as I add something, my edit button disappears, right? I want to be able to edit each individual task. So we're not going to do it in our JavaScript. I'm sorry, we're not going to do it in our HTML. We're going to do it in our JavaScript. In our update HTML, instead of just a list item coming out with the to-do task, we are also going to put a button. And in that button, we are going to add the word edit. So now when I save and I refresh and I save my HTML and refresh, okay, ABC, edit, DEF, edit, right? So what it is doing is that loop is doing the same magic, but it is giving me an edit button on both of them. Okay. So what can we do with our button? We can make the on click work. So we can say on click, and we can say on click equals edit button pressed. And we're going to add our parentheses, and then we're going to say function edit button pressed. And we are just going to console.log edit pressed. I'm going to save, come over here. I'm going to refresh, type in ABC, click edit, edit pressed, type DEF, type edit, and my edit button was pressed. So we're going to take a break there. I will leave this on the screen. The only two lines that we changed was this button on click in our loop, and then we added a new function for it as well. I believe Amazon just got stuck in my driveway, which is why my dog is now going crazy. Sorry about that. So we will take a break here. We will circle back together at 7:15. And I am going to make sure Amazon is not in my driveway still, and then I will be back to answer any questions.
HTML to update, to do task button on click.
If anyone has questions, feel free to shout them out.
Edit button pressed is not defined. Right, so you gotta put.
So edit button pressed is not defined, just means you have to add the
Sorry, I didn't
function
realize I had the mute off.
on 13 to 15. Completely fine. I talk to myself all day long.
So what did you say? Sorry, I was fixing my mute thing.
So your edit button pressed is probably working fine. What you need to do is add your function edit button pressed up here, line 13 to 15.
Okay, you said that was the only line of code we changed, so I was trying to.
Sorry,
Thank you.
this edit button pressed and the function up at the top.
Right, okay.
Latonia, sorry, I missed your message in Slack. Do you want to share your screen? You shouldn't be seeing that.
Okay, hold on one second. Do you see my screen?
I do. Okay, so it is yelling about line 26.
Okay.
And so if we look at our function update HTML, it has our const list document dot get element by ID, and then it says let HTML to update equals those quotes. And then notice that curly brace there. That
Yeah.
curly brace is saying that's it, I'm done. So now that is all that is going to happen in update HTML. I'm not going to do the for loop. I'm not going to list.inner HTML. I'm not going to do any of that because that curly brace is on line 21. So
this
where
is
do
an
you want to move that to?
Here.
Yep. And then save and refresh.
That was it?
That was it.
Okay, thank you.
And so it's important to go over like why you were getting the HTML to update is undefined or whatever the reference there was. Basically, it was saying, well, you're referencing line 23. You're saying HTML to update.
Okay,
but HTML to update is only accessible in that function.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
And that's super helpful when you have a lot of variables and you go, all right, I don't want variables to get mixed together here. And so that's why it's called variable scoping. And it's basically saying that let HTML to update is only accessible within that function.
Now, why didn't VS Code say, hey, you have an odd one here? Because usually I'll have like a little red squiggly.
So the reason it didn't was because it is technically correct to put that closing brace where you had it. What it probably did do is it probably put a red squiggly under HTML to update.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
No problem.
So it doesn't matter at all what order the functions are in.
That's a loaded question.
Okay.
Most of the time it does not.
Okay.
So what JavaScript does is when you say, hey, I've got script.js, what it does first is it goes through and looks at all the functions, and whatever code you have outside of a function goes, forget about you. I want to know all the functions. So it skims through all of those. It saves all of those in its memory. And then it goes, okay, now let me go through the code, ignore whatever is in the functions, and I'm going to go line by line and execute them. And when I hit a line that's calling a function, now I'm going to go to my function memory from the first pass, pull it in, and execute it. Okay. Generally, that is how it works. Okay. There are definitely times where order does matter, and order does matter of things that aren't functions. So like the whole, cannot reference HTML to update of undefined. That was a point where it was like the order did matter. And because we were accessing a variable outside of the function, it couldn't see it. And so it is order.
Well, that's the scope of the function, though. That's not the order of the functions on the page.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah. So you just kind of alphabetize them? Is that how you would organize them to be able to find them when you're trying to look back at them? And writing new code?
There's no gold standard. There's no rule there. I tend to do it the order of the buttons on the page is the order of the functions.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, I can't really give you more input than that. Okay. Any questions before anything pop in your brain during break? Food shake anything loose? Doing good? Okay. All right, we got our edit button close. Let's go back to our to-do list, right? Whenever we come out of a break, we should look at our to-do list. So we need to add a button to prompt for a new name when renaming a task. Well, we've got half of that done. We've got the new button added. Now we need to get it to ask for a new name. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go to our edit button pressed, and instead of console logging something, we're going to use a dirty little trick called window.
Max,
I'm not sharing my
please.
screen. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to go in here. I'm not being dismissive of you guys. It's just it's like I'm shooting myself for not remembering to do that. Okay, so I go to in my edit button pressed, I deleted out my console log, and I'm going to use this new thing called window.prompt. And window is like document. It's one of those special words in JavaScript that when you think of your document, you're referring to your HTML document. The window is the thing that is containing that HTML document. So you can think of window in JavaScript as actually the browser window that you're looking at your code in. So what we're going to do is we're going to say window.prompt, and VS Code's helping us out here, right? It's saying message string. So it's saying, what would you like me to prompt for? So we can say, enter new name here. So I'm going to save that. I'm going to come over here. I'm going to, okay, I'm going to refresh. I'm going to type in ABC. I add my to-do. That's great. I'm going to click on edit, and I get this nice little pop-up that says enter new name here. Okay, I'll type in DEF and hit OK. And nothing happened. Okay, well, let's go back. We window.prompt enter new name here. Any guesses why nothing happened? We didn't tell it to do anything. We just told it to ask for it, and then we just let it sit there. So let's say we're going to put that in a const called new name, right? Because the only time we're going to change that value is when the first time we window.prompt for it. And then we can console.log out our new name. Okay, so we come over here, we refresh, we type in ABC, we add our to do, we click edit, we type in DEF. Okay, we got our console logout, and it's still ABC. So there are 2 places that we need to update ABC. Can you guys name one of them?
On click, because it says click handler.
Kind of. We're already in that click handler. This edit button pressed is the click handler. So there are 2 places that we have the name where we have to update it.
Oh, in the parentheses after edit button pressed.
Kind of.
In our
We need
to-do
to
list?
update it in to-do list. That's one of them. We need to
Yeah.
update it in our array. And then what have we learned about updating our array? After we update the array, we have to update our HTML. So it's looking at the array to update it. So we have to get it updated in the array first, and then we can update the HTML once the array is updated based off of the data that's in the array. So when we update something in the array, what we can do is we can say to-do list, and we're going to say the first thing in that to-do list, set it equal to the new name that we just prompted for. And after we get it in the array, update our HTML. So again, we windowed prompt. This is the parameter that's showing up in the prompt. Whatever the user types in and hits OK gets now stored in new name. Now we need to take that new name and shove it in our array. And after we shove it in our array, we update the HTML based off of now what is in the array to show up in the browser. Kyle, you look like your head's about to like just pop off your body.
Yeah, no, I'm just trying to go back through the file and remember what update HTML does.
Yeah, so let's do that.
I'm having trouble remembering all the different connections here, and I'm just kind of guessing at things instead of trying to think it through. So now I'm trying to think it through.
Yeah, so let's think that through together. So what we did is we updated the array, but remember that array is siloed in JavaScript, right? That's just a data structure. But what we need to do is then tell the browser, hey, go generate out this HTML based off of what is in the array. So now what happens is we've updated the array here, but now we call update HTML. So we're going to run this whole block of code again. So this code is going to execute in order, right? We got the name, we added it to the array, we updated our HTML. Now what's update HTML do? All right, it goes back to the HTML and grabs the UL. It starts out blank because we always start blank. Then it goes through each item in the to-do list. And now this to-do task is going to have the updated name in it. Why? Because we accessed to-do list and we added the new name into it. So we're going to go through, and for each item in the list, we are going to add the LI and update it to that new name. And after we get through each item in the list here, we are then going to update the inner HTML to show that newly generated HTML. So let's test it. Save, come over here, we refresh. I type in ABC, I click edit, I type DEF, and 3 things are going to happen here. It's going to save the prompt information into new name. It is going to update the array, and then it is going to update our HTML based off of the information that is in the array. So I hit OK, and I get DEF. Oh man, we're cooking with gas. I'm going to add another thing. I'm going to add 1, 2, 3, and I'm going to edit, and I'm going to type in ABC. Oh, crap. That's not what I wanted to happen. I'm going to click edit and type 3, 4, 5. Okay. It's updating the first thing every time. If I click on this edit button, it works great. But if I click on this edit button, I type in 1, 2, 3. It's always updating the first thing. Where in my code is it looking and updating the first thing every time?
In the loop, right?
Before even in the loop.
Okay. No, because the loop iterates through, never mind.
In the array, where Shaw in the array? 0, index 0. So that's actually a trick. When I'm saying, why is it always doing the first one? First in an array is always 0 because we 0 index in the array. So we need to basically tell our edit button, what edit button are you clicking on? I need to know which one you're clicking on so I know which one to update. So how do we give a function additional information?
Parameter.
A parameter, you got it. So we're going to come down here to our on click, and we have this handy spot where there are empty parentheses. And if you look up here, there's a handy spot for empty parentheses. Well, that's convenient. I'm going to just type in cat. And then I'm going to type in up here, animal. And what's going to happen is this word cat is going to get passed in to my animal parameter up here. So I can access it in my function. So I'll just comment these out. I'm going to save. I'm going to refresh. I'm going to type in ABC. And when I click on edit, I get unexpected end of input. Oh, I used quotes inside of quotes. I use single quotes there. ABC, add to do. And if I click on edit, I get cat. Okay, so let's talk about why I'm using cat and animal. We want to understand that we have access to information here that we are then able to pass into our function and do something with inside the function. Okay, that's great. Get parameters, get the syntax, get where the data is going. How does that help us? Well, if we look, our loop knows exactly where in the loop we are. So we can give that information to the edit button pressed. And so what we're going to do is in here, we are going to pass in the index of what item we are on. Okay, but what is the index? The loop has to tell us what index is. So we're going to modify our loop up here, and we are going to say index and to do task. But in order for index to be filled, I have to tell the to-do list that I want the entries of the to-do list. So basically, we modified our loop to give us entries, and entries now knows, instead of just giving me the to-do task, also give me the index. And so now in here, I can console.log both the index and my to-do task just to see what that loop is doing. So I'm going to save. I'm going to come over here. I'm going to refresh and type in ABC. And we see we get 0 and ABC. And if I type in, DEF, I get 1 and DEF. And if I keep going here, you get the drift. I get 0, 1, 2. And the string that it's updating. So now we've got access to index. So we need to tell our edit button, hey, by the way, you're updating. This is the edit button that is being clicked. So now edit button index is getting passed here. So we come up here, and instead of saying animal, we say index. And we can console log out our index right here if we wanted to prove that all the data is flowing through. But instead of saying 0, I'm going to say update this specific index. Right? And again, this is all to tell the edit button which edit button is actually getting pressed. So what we updated, again, to go over all of this, the to-do list we said we need index information, not just the text of the tag. So we added dot entries to that. That is a special function that you can call on any array that instead of just returning the value, it is also going to return the index of that value. So now that we have entries giving us the index, we have to update and say, in addition to getting the to-do list task when we loop over this array, we would also like to get the index as well, right? So this dot entries code is lining up with this index and to-do task. Okay, great. We were already using to-do task here, but now we need to tell it when you click on this button, this is the index of the button that you are clicking on. So what we did is we added index here as a parameter to the edit button pressed. Okay, great. Now we've got to tell edit button pressed, I'm going to send you the index information. So we come over to edit button pressed, our function, and we update the parameter to include index. Great. Now that we've got the index, we're still going to prompt to enter new name here. And we don't care which one they click on. We're always going to ask that prompt. But now when we get the new name, we are going to go back to the to-do list array and update the specific index that we are giving the new name to. And then, as always, we update all the HTML.
Can I ask a question that might be basic?
No. Kidding. Go ahead.
The update HTML, the open parentheses, are they empty because it's the entire form? Or
it's empty because we aren't passing any parameters. So if we go down to this update HTML, it's not expecting any parameters.
Because a parameter would be telling it something specific?
Yeah, so if it needed specific information, so like if we wanted to pass the index, for example, if we wanted to say, hey, update HTML, you need to know what the index is, we could put index here. Then in our update HTML function, we could put index and console log our index down here. So the point of parameters is being able to pass data into functions. But sometimes the function already has access to that data or doesn't need that specific information. And so oftentimes you will see parameters are just empty. And so the only time we're using parameters here is right here. We're saying edit button pressed. And then if you ignore this syntax, right, we are basically saying pass in the index from information that you got up here.
Max?
Yes.
Elena has a really weird error. It's an invalid regular expression, invalid flags.
Yeah, you've got a slash somewhere where a slash does not belong.
It says that it's in my index HTML line 1, but I haven't even done anything. My line 1 says doc type, but I didn't even type in that stuff. I just used the exclamation shortcut.
Let me test this to make sure it's working, and then I'll let you screen share.
Okay.
So I'm going to save. I'm going to refresh. I'm going to type in ABC. I'm going to add the to-do, and I'm going to click edit, and I'm going to say ABC1 and OK. And that works. And I'm going to type in DEF, and I'm going to click edit, and I'm going to say DEF2, and that works. And I'm just picking a random thing here, right? I can type in 1, 2, 3, add it, and rename it to cat, and that works. So I'm going to stop here. I'm going to update the code in Slack. Okay, the second to last message now has everything updated there. Whoever wants to catch up can, and I'm going to help Alina. Go ahead and share your screen.
Okay, so this is the error message that I'm getting.
Okay, let's go to your index.html. Nothing is jumping out to me
I
there.
actually like erased my whole code and I went into Slack and I copied and pasted your code. So
Go ahead and hit save again. And then go back there and refresh. Okay.
still the same.
Okay. So let's pay attention to that. Didn't pop up until we hit the edit button. So that will help us narrow down that it's probably something in the on submit. So let's go to
So on submit. Where is it?
It's the add new task, right?
Right here, right? Oh wait, the edit button pressed.
Edit button pressed, enter new name here. So we've got that to-do list index.
Right here.
Yep. Where is index defined?
Oh, so I didn't define index.
Yeah. So we have to add index to line 10 as a parameter.
In here.
Yep. And then in line 20, when edit button is pressed, we also have to add index in, but we're going to do $, curly brace. And then type in index there, lowercase I. Okay, but we still don't have index defined. We need to get index from the to-do list, right? So in line 19, after to-do list, but before the parenthesis, we're going to add dot entries. And then parenthesis, open parenthesis, closing parenthesis. And now in const to do task, we're going to surround that in square brackets. Yep, you got it. And then before the to do task, but after the opening square bracket, you're going to add the word index and then a comma. And then save. And then refresh. And then give it a try. Okay, so same error. You're gonna hate yourself. You're missing a closing quote before the closing arrow of edit.
Closing arrow edit. Hold on, where am I? This? No.
Right here.
Oh. Huh.
And it's no closing quote, not a. So we have a quote here we have to match, and so we just have to close it right where your cursor is. And that's one of those tough ones to see because it's and then refresh your page.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
No problem. Other questions? Would it be helpful for me to explain everything we just did again?
Maybe, because I keep getting an error.
Okay. So I'm going to explain it, and then I will let you share your screen if you're stuck still. Okay, so starting back from when we added the edit button, we looked at our code and we said we have to add the edit button when we add the to-do task, right? Because we want that button to be added every time we add a new task. We want several edit buttons to show up. So we added in our update HTML a button that shows up. And then in that button, we added this on-click event. And we called the on-click edit button pressed. So then we came up here to this function, because on click is always going to be looking for a function, and we called it edit button pressed. But what happened is we asked for the new name, but when we set to-do list, we needed to know which edit button was being pressed. We needed to know what name we were trying to update. So what we did is we went all the way back to the loop, the array, because that's the only thing that knows where we're at, is this loop that's going over and over it. So we said, hey, in addition to just the to-do task, in addition to just giving us the name, we also would like the index. And so to get the index, we added this thing called dot entries. And what that did is now the loop, instead of just getting the to-do task, it is also going to get the index. Okay, great. Now we have the index. We've got to get that all the way down to the function. So on our on click, we added index as a parameter. So now when we click on that button, the index is getting sent into this function as a parameter right here. So now after we ask for the new name and store that in new name, we know exactly what thing to update in the to-do list. We know it's updating the index of the edit button that was clicked on. And so after we put the new name in there, we still have to update our HTML because the array doesn't auto update the HTML. So this update HTML is saying, now that your array is up to date, blow out all the HTML, generate it back over again with the information that's in the list, and then go ahead and display that onto the browser page. Does anyone have questions about a specific line that you don't understand, or why I have certain syntax somewhere, or right? It's much more important right now to understand how everything is working, and then you can get to the syntax tonight, right? Rewatching the video, right, that's completely fine. But the understanding pretty much every line that is on the screen right now and why that code is there is the more important part.
Your audio keeps cutting in and out for me. I don't know if it's just me, but I keep missing like whole sentences.
Is that happening for anyone else? Carolyn, sounds like it's on your side.
So I'll just have to use the closed captions, I guess. All right, thanks.
You can try dropping out of the meeting and coming back in to see if that helps.
I'm on.
Your audio just dropped out on us, Carolyn. So I'm pretty sure it's an issue on your side.
I was muted.
Oh, okay.
No, I'm good.
Okay.
Thank you.
It would be helpful for me if you could just paste your code again, because
Yep, sure
I have
can.
extra curly braces in here and stuff. I think when I pasted the stuff in with like the other forms of loop, I accidentally pasted some other parts of your code. I've got like double copies of functions and things like that. So
I just repasted it into Slack,
Thank
so it
you.
should be up to date.
So can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Basically, when we're in the loop with the for const index and to do task.
Yep.
We need the index because without it, it's just doing the task. And because we don't specify the index, which is the position of it, would just be doing that first task. That's right. Like the index is the position, basically.
The index is the position of the item in the array. Correct.
Okay. So yeah. Okay.
Which we didn't need before, right? Because we were just dumping the task information out on the page. But because edit button pressed is this function works for any of the edit buttons, the edit button doesn't know what one is getting clicked.
Right. Right. The edit button is a general thing or general rule.
Correct.
And you need to apply it specifically to each thing, which is what the index is doing.
Correct.
Right.
Dominique, it's in the student pasted code C2 channel. And it's a message from 6:15 tonight that I keep on updating. So the latest code is now in the student pasted code C2 channel. If you're having trouble getting to it, you can hit Command K, or if you're on Windows, Control K, and type in student dash pasted, and that should bring it up. But just to reiterate, it is that message from 6:15. I just keep updating it over and over again. Awesome. All right, I want to do one more feature tonight. Let me see if it's the next one on the to-do list. All right, so we added a button to prompt for the new name when renaming a task. So let's format text strike through. Okay, add button to delete and update HTML. This is going to be very similar to what we just did with the edit button. Is anyone feeling ambitious enough to lead me through what I should type?
We're gonna add another button.
Yep.
And then
Hold up.
between-
All right. Go ahead.
So we're gonna start our new button
Yep.
and close that out. And then we're gonna type, what was it, delete or?
Yep.
And then we're gonna close out our button. And then I'll just keep going because you didn't say that was wrong, but I'm sure you'll tell me at some point. And then just add the next one, do the same thing. Do we want them in a row?
Yeah, putting them in a row is fine.
Okay, so we're just gonna start another button and put in I forget what the other one was.
Let's just do delete right now.
Okay.
So after we add the button, what do? On click, you got it, Mel? And we're gonna on click and we're gonna equals, and we're gonna say delete button pressed. And then what information do we need in here?
Position, we need the position of it.
Yep, we need the index. And so we're going to pass in index. And this time we don't need to modify the array because we already have access to the index. So we don't need to change the loop. We're going to reuse the same index for the edit button that we're using for the delete button. And so I'm just going to clean up this code a little bit here and put it on multiple lines. Hopefully that helps a little bit. Okay, so now we've got delete button pressed. We've got to tell it what to do. So we're going to come down after our edit button and we're going to say delete button pressed and the index. All right. And in here, we are going to, I always like before I delete something, to window.confirm, are you sure you want to delete this? So just like window.prompt, where prompt gave us a text box, window.confirm is going to give us a yes and no answer. So basically, we want to say, if the user confirms something, so I just took that whole window.confirm and wrapped it in an if statement. And that is basically saying if the user has confirmed and hit the yes button on this, then we want to update the array. How do we delete an item from an array?
Splice.
Splice it. And where do we want to splice? We want to splice at the index, the thing that we passed in. And how many things do we want to splice out? Just one of them. And then, because we updated our array, we also have to update our HTML. Okay, I'm going to save. We're going to refresh. We're going to add ABC. And we got our button. And we'll add DEF just to be sure. And we're going to click delete. And it says, are you sure you want to delete this? No, I don't. Cancel. Stayed there fine, no problem. Why? because we put this in an if statement, we're saying only splice it and update the HTML if the user confirms they want to delete this. So we could skip this if statement and ask them to confirm it and then delete it anyway. So that's the reason why we need that if, is because we're saying we need to make sure that they confirmed it. And if they confirmed it, then we'll go ahead and delete it out. So we come back over here, we click delete, it says, are you sure you want to delete this? You hit OK, and away it goes. So very similar to our edit button code. You notice we're calling update HTML. You notice we're still using window to either prompt or to confirm the user. The only difference is instead of updating the index in the array, we instead use splice to remove it from the array. And we can confirm all of this because we can console.log our to-do list here and put it up here. And then we can console log it right after we splice it as well, right? And so this is a good way to remember how this is all working under the hood. I can refresh, I can add ABC, I can add DEF. I can click on delete here. And what comes out is my array of ABC and DEF. And when I hit OK, out comes my array with just ABC, right? And it doesn't matter how many things I add to this. Whenever I click delete, it's going to show me my entire array. And then when I click on OK, it's going to show me my array with that item removed. So I'm going to console log these. I'm going to comment out those lines, but I will leave them in there in case it helps you see the data structure. You could also do the same thing right up here. Before line 15 and after line 15, you could add a console login for your array to see what your array is updating. So before I break, I'm going to go to my to-do list and I'm going to say add button to delete and update HTML. And I'm going to cross that off. Now, we have 2 more tasks for our to-do list. We want to add a button to check it off as done. And we also want to pretty it up with Bootstrap. I want to open, so to give you more insight, to get you excited for tomorrow. Tomorrow, we are going to convert our app to, instead of just using an array, we are going to use an array of objects. Once we do that, we will do another exercise on arrays and objects and accessing different information. You're going to get practice creating an array. You're going to get practice creating the objects. You're going to love to hate the syntax with all of that and mixing up your curly braces and your square braces. But we are going to create a data structure from hand, and then we're going to access different pieces of that data structure. Once we do that, we will come back to the to-do list app, give you a break from JavaScript land, and we'll practice a little bit more with Bootstrap of how we can make this a little prettier. And hopefully that will be a good review of Bootstrap for you guys for your capstone. So that is everything I would like to do tomorrow, but I would like to give you the remaining 36 minutes of class to catch up to where we are at. So I am going to update the Slack right now. I am going to also post this in the GitHub. So if GitHub is an easier place for you to pull the code, you can do that. I would encourage everyone to try this by hand. Try not copying and pasting any of it, because the only way that you'll get this syntax down and get comfortable typing the curly braces and the parentheses and the square brackets and all of that is by typing it out by hand. So I'm happy to stick around. I'm happy to help you guys when you get stuck anywhere. But the goal is tomorrow you have all of this code caught up without any of it copied and pasted. Alina, typing it over 5 times, not a bad idea. I know you guys look at me and you go, he must be superhuman how he can type that fast. But it is something that it just takes practice, and eventually it becomes muscle memory. I can tell you where all the keys on the keyboard are. And I think most people are like, what is a square bracket? I've never looked at my keyboard to see a square bracket before. And it's just something that you get with practice. So I'm going to quickly post this into the classroom Git repo, and then I will be around for any questions. And Phobelia, that's a great point. Retaining it better from typing it, that is totally something that it's like when you take notes in college, the act of writing them down is actually what gets them in your memory. So even if you never review the notes again, the fact that you were handwriting them out or typing them out is enough to help your memory retain it. So whatever it takes is completely fine. I just want to give you guys 30 minutes now to hopefully catch up. And Karen, great point. Yeah, definitely you can put your own spin on it. You can play around with each individual variable and add something into it. You can add in your console logs wherever you want. You can delete out your lines and see what it does instead. This is meant to definitely like take it piece by piece, and don't try. You probably won't get this code right if you start from the first line and work your way down. So I would encourage you guys to go to that Google Doc, start at the first bullet point in the first crossed out item, and start there. Because reading this code line by line, it isn't going to make sense to you, right? The way I write code, I do not write it linearly. When I write code, I write the HTML first, and then I don't go make every button work all at once. I make one button, and then I go to my JavaScript and I make that button work. And then I go back to my HTML and I add another button, and then I go to my JavaScript and I make that work. So this is not going to make sense if you just say, line 1, I'm just going to type exactly what he said, right? It's not about dictation or any of that kind of typing. It's about making sure you're understanding the lines. And if you need to go to the crossed out list and then match it up to my code and then try it, that's going to be a much better way than just opening my code and starting from the top and working your way down. And if you're already caught up, awesome, congrats. You're ready for tomorrow. I know there are 1 or 2 of you lurking around in there who are following along with me. So congrats for that. All right, let me get this posted in GitHub, and then I'll be around for any questions. If you work better on your own, if you get distracted by hearing what other people are doing, feel free to drop out of the Zoom room. And if you have a question and want to pop back in, just open it back up. I'll be here until 8:30. I just posted on the CIC Student C2 channel in Slack, the GitHub link, and I put it in the Zoom chat in case you guys find that more helpful. It's the exact same code that is in Slack, but, oh, I'm sorry, I just sent that to Latanya. Okay, there we go. Now I sent it to everyone. So in case you find the GitHub code easier to read, you're welcome to take it from there as well. And Latonia, go ahead and share your screen. And again, if we're distracting you guys from getting through your code, feel free to drop from the Zoom meeting, and you can always catch up on the recording later, or come back in if you have a question. Okay, go to your console for me. Okay, so we've got an unexpected end of input on line 43. So line 43, we have our reset to-dos, our to-do lists, and our update HTML. So the problem is probably not all the way at the bottom. So let's match up our curly braces. So we've got our HTML to update, and we have our opening backtick there, right? Right here, we've got our opening backtick. Do we have our closing backtick? No, we do not. You're muted, by the way, but I can lip read you. So we go ahead and add your closing backtick right there where it belongs. And now notice all of that has turned to the right color. So you should be able to save. Now your prettier starts working, and I think you should be good to go.
Thank you.
Before I forget, I am going to ask everyone to fill out that 30-second form again. It is super, super helpful in figuring out pace, figuring out, you know, there are very few ways of getting through this without feeling like you're just getting a lot thrown at you, because you are, you know, there's just a lot coming. But if I'm going to send out that Google form link again, if you could fill that out for me before you leave tonight, that would be appreciated. And then Karen just asked a good question. Does 11 a.m. on Saturday work for everyone for office hours? Do we prefer Friday evening
how long
over?
Is it for? Yeah, there's a Women in Code thing on Saturday from 10 to 12 that has to do with building your portfolio.
Okay.
I have not registered yet, but I would like to.
Okay.
Yeah, I was thinking about that too.
What time is the career module on Friday?
6 o'clock, I believe.
6 to 7. So
Yep.
options are either 7 to 8 on Friday, or we can do 9 to 10 on Saturday. Do we have a preference there?
Maybe make a poll, because then there's a
Yep.
couple others that dropped out already, I think.
Karen, could you do that for me?
Sure, if I remember how.
So in Slack, we'll vote.
Yep.
And then determine. Okay, thank you.
And definitely thank you for the feedback on the career module and the Women in Code thing, because we do want to schedule around that. And if you cannot make office hours, feel free to send me any questions that you have, because I will make sure we're live on YouTube, and then you can always go back and watch that video. yes, Susan, the LI item is what makes that bullet show up. You could actually play around with changing that LI tag out to a span tag, and you would actually see all of the to-do items like back to back with each other.
I don't know what you mean, but I took it out because when I refreshed, I deleted it, but the dot was still there because I wasn't sure if I could remove it, and then I removed it, and then it's just blank, which is what I wanted. But
Cool.
what's span? Where would I put the span? In the UL?
No,
Within it?
instead of the LI in
Yep.
the update HTML, you could replace both the opening and closing LI tags with the tag SPAN. And then that would make it so all the items, instead of them being on their own line as a bullet, they would all be smushed together.
Oh, I don't want that.
Yeah, that's more of like a play around thing than a functionality thing.
Okay. Thank you.
Question, Max. Are we actually using the to-do list in our arrays? That stuff's not actually in there yet, right?
The stuff that goes in the array is the things that we type in the input and click the add button on.
Right, but we're working from an actual to-do list. So wouldn't we want to establish that the array includes these things and could actually really go through and say, I did this, or are we just using that to help us go through and learn how to do that process? And it doesn't matter what is going to be in the list, it's just understanding it.
It's just understanding it right now. There's nothing stopping you from actually making it a to-do list, right? And saying like, oh, pick up the groceries and, go for the walk or whatever. Like, you could type all of that in. What we haven't tackled yet is how do you make it so when you close the page and reopen it, your to-do list items are still going to be there. And so that's a little bit out of scope of what we will cover at least this week. If I'm really short on content next week, that is something that I can show you of how to save that into the browser. But the more correct answer for that will be using a server and a database and actually saving each item into a database.
Okay.
And so I will likely come in after Ryan teaches you about internet and REST and APIs, and Joey comes in and teaches you about React. I will come back in and go, well, now that you have React, let's recreate this to-do list. But now we're going to make an API call that Ryan is teaching you, and we're going to update the state. And then we are going to save that in the database through your node server. And so we will actually circle all the way back to this project. We will start it over from scratch, and we will start using all the concepts that you have learned between now and, I believe, July, when I teach next.
I didn't know, because we're actually, we're going through that list to help us with the process. And I just thought if we actually put in the arrays in the code, the list, and it would, but
Yeah, you could do that. You could
from
copy and paste.
not from like shopping, but from the thing we're working through.
Yeah, you totally could do that. You could take it out of Google Docs and then write up all the way on the first line of code where it says to-do list. You could paste in the items there. Yep. And then just make sure they're in quotes and you have a comma after each one. And then whenever you refresh the page, that list will show up.
Would it be single quote or double?
Either one would work as long as you're
Just,
consistent.
depending on the instructor, we've sort of been told this or that. So as long as you're consistent, who cares?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
No problem.
Hello, Max.
Shoot.
This is Latonia. I have a question about copying and pasting. I feel like I've heard definitely copy and paste because it helps you minimize errors. But then I feel like I also heard definitely do not copy and paste. for other reasons. So can you just kind of clarify?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question. I couldn't do my job without copy and paste, but I make sure that I not only understand every single character that I'm copying and pasting before I do copy and paste it, but I also have reached the point where me writing more code is probably not going to make my typing any faster or make me any better at typing syntax. So if you are stuck, if you are ready to throw your computer out the window, if you think you are just going crazy because you think you have everything in there the way that the way the instructor does, then you can try a copy and paste just to make sure that it is actually an error in your code. Copy and paste is definitely something that I use in my job. It's not, but like I said, I'm probably at a different level of coding at this point. So the reason why it is important to not copy and paste is because syntactically, the only way to get better at typing that syntax is practice. And there is a part of the career interview for most jobs called the technical interview or the coding interview, where they will give you a problem and they will ask you, hey, go do this. And it's just like free code camp, where they'll say, here are the 3 things it needs to do, go out and write that code. And if you're struggling to type in HTML and JavaScript and getting stuck on syntax errors, for an employer, that may be a little bit of a red flag of, hey, we're hiring this person to write code all day long and they're struggling typing it in. And so that is definitely the downside of copy and paste. The upside of copy and paste is exactly what you copy is exactly what you will paste. So I'm not saying never use copy and paste, but I would prioritize practicing of typing code so you get the syntax down. And then I would also say, when you do copy and paste, to make sure that the understanding of what you're copying you understand it. And Alina, you're not the only one with syntax errors. I would be surprised if anyone right now was not getting stuck on syntax errors. And in fact, there have probably been 5 times in tonight's class alone where I had a syntax error or something spelled wrong. And the only reason that it is not as obvious is because right before I save, I'm proofreading my code and I've trained myself to just, make sure the colors aren't a little off of my code, or make sure that I've got that case right. Or, when I read an error message, I often can tell you exactly where that error is before I even open my code and reread it again. And again, that is just years of practice. That is looking at it and saying, cannot read this of undefined. There's nothing wrong with that line of code. And knowing that when it is an undefined error, it's not normally the line that it is yelling at, it's the line before it or wherever you assign that variable in the first place. So it is definitely something that takes practice, but that practice, you can't get when you just copy and paste the code. So I don't want to override what other instructors have said about copy and paste, and there is definitely a time and place for copy and paste, just to make sure you understand it. And when you do copy and paste it and it's working, go back to your original version of the code and try and work through it once you have made it down to that section. Alina, I can try and share my screen on VS Code colors. Totally a personal preference thing, but if I go to code up at the top, preferences, and then color theme, that opens all of these options for me. I use one called Darkula. I believe I had to custom install that. That wasn't an option right out of the bat. But in order to do that, I believe I went over here to this square with a smaller square coming out of it. And when you do that, you can do a search. I installed Darkula here. So you would just type in Darkula and it would come up with an install button. And then once you install it, you can go back up to code up at the top, go back to preferences, go down to color theme. and then you could type in Darkula, and that would be an option. You can see there are a bunch of them built in. Darkula is one that I use in my professional code editor. I use one called WebStorm. WebStorm is a great tool. I know Karen is hooked on WebStorm. All the senior developers at work all use WebStorm. And so it's a great option. It is one of the only paid code editors on the market. I believe it's between 70 and $100, and that is a year. And the yearly price does come down over time. So it is expensive. There's no doubt about it. But when I think about how many hours I use in a text editor and how many hours it has saved me, it is completely worth it. It starts at 129. It's even higher than I thought it was. I believe they have an individual license as opposed to a professional license, which does bring it down even, I think, from the 129, but I could be wrong. Anyway, it's an expensive tool. Totally get it. It's an expensive tool. But when you've gotten to the end of the bootcamp program, that is when I encourage you to try to do the trial then. They do have a 14-day free trial. It is something that right now you wouldn't appreciate the power of. It is something called an IDE, which is an integrated development environment. And an IDE is a little bit heavier than a text editor. So VS Code is a text editor. You can add extensions in. You can make VS Code do everything that WebStorm does. But what you're paying WebStorm for is that it's all pre-configured. You don't have to find the extensions. You don't have to fiddle with it. You don't have to get it just right. WebStorm just works right out of the box. And it has a lot of powerful tools built into it. So to summarize the long rant, it's a great tool. You can, I encourage you to do the trial, but I would wait to do the trial towards the end of the program, because that's when you'll start to be able to embrace the power of all the features that come with it. And by the way, every instructor will have a different text editor that they use. I know a lot of professional developers that do use VS Code full time. It's not like WebStorm is a must-have tool. It is just something that more professional, more senior developers pay for because they think it's worth it.
Okay, Max, 2 questions or 2 things. One, what is inner HTML?
Yeah, so inner HTML is a property that the document gives you so that you can update it. So there are other properties that come with inner that come with .get element by ID. So one example is you could do a .style and add in some CSS there, and that would actually change your HTML to include the CSS. So .inner HTML is basically saying, hey, I've got this UL tag, and I can do all different kinds of things with this UL tag. I can access the style and add some CSS to it, and I can make that dynamic in my JavaScript, or I can remove this element. I can just delete it, and it would disappear from my HTML. But what we want is that .inner HTML, which is basically saying inside this tag, put some HTML in that I'm going to tell you.
In the JavaScript tag.
It's going to go inside the HTML tag.
Okay.
So let me help visualize that. Okay, so in our HTML, we started out with okay, so if I open this, we have item 1, item 2, item 3. But what is item 1, item 2, item 3? Those are all LI tags. But what is the what are all three of those LIs in? They are in this parent UL tag, right? And so what we're doing is when we say in our JavaScript, list inner HTML, what is the inner part of the HTML we're updating? Well, in our index, the inner part of this UL is these three LIs, right? If this is the outer tag, these three are the inner part of it.
Okay.
Right? Because the close is here. So that's what's telling it that's the outside. This is the opening of the outside, and this is the closing of the outside. And so what we want to do is we want to shove some new stuff inside inner HTML.
And so where in the code do you put the inner HTML part again? At the
Right here.
end of after the function's closed.
Yeah, so what we
List.
no, the function closes down here.
Oh, but you commented it out, so it's not there.
I commented out alternative.
Oh, that's part of what's going on with my error message. Oh, okay.
Yeah, the curly brace is all the way down on line 61 of my code.
Okay. Yeah, and I didn't include the stuff that you commented out. I took it out.
Yep, which is fine. You as long as you've got a curly brace after the list inner HTML, because this update HTML is running all of this code in here.
Oh, except that after that, there's the reset to do function.
Yes,
Right?
which is a separate function.
Right. So, oh, there's another curly brace for the, okay, it's got to go. Yep, that, I think I got that. Okay, goody, goody. And then the other thing, I don't want to take up someone else's spot, but I did want to kind of show you the error that I keep getting.
Sure, go ahead. No one else has questions, right?
All right, let me just, yeah, no, but everyone else knows what's going on but me.
No, I don't think that's the case. I see a lot of furrowed brows and a lot of reviewing code. So
All right, let me just
one more reminder to fill out that that 30-second feedback form. I sent that in both Zoom and the CIC student C2 channel. That is super helpful for me for figuring out what needs to be adjusted tomorrow. And it does appear that Friday from 7 to 8 is taking the lead for office hours. But if you would like to vote in that, that is also in the CIC student C2 channel in Slack.
all right, you see my screen?
Nope.
Oh. I thought I had become like the queen of screen share. Okay.
And Alina, you're totally right on the repetition. Repetition makes it click, which is why you hear me explaining the same thing over and over again, and why one of you is probably, you know, packaging up the anthrax right now to mail off to me. So I get that it is sometimes when you're like, I get it already, but that repetition, sometimes even though I'm saying the same thing over and over again, that's what will make it click.
We need it. We need it. So am I sharing?
You are. And so the first thing I do is I jump right to script.js 46 unexpected token curly brace. So let's go to your JavaScript. And let's go down to line 46. And whenever it's the last line, that always tells me the problem is not on line 46. The problem is somewhere above line 46.
Yeah, exactly.
So let's just delete that one out and see what happens.
The one where my cursor is?
No, the one all the way down on 46. And then save.
Mm-hmm.
And then go back to your browser and refresh. Okay, that went away. Let's try.
You make it so easy. I spent an hour trying to figure this out, and you're like, oh, you.
So the correct way of doing that is make sure that you have your opening and curly braces right, and make sure your indentation is right.
Yep.
So if you go back to your VS Code, you've got your indentation correct in that the opening curly brace and closing brace on reset to-dos is correct, but that whole function is indented. Why is that indented?
Oh, they all should, oh. That's a good question, because it wanted to be.
And so even if you have all of your code running, I would encourage you to go back in and manually fix your indentation, because if you look at that indentation now isn't right. Go back down.
Everyone's indented, yep.
So, but line 45 should be one line over. That curly brace should line up with where the function opens. So now all of a sudden you look at your function and you know exactly what code is executing inside that function is just those two lines, right? And so if we go up a little bit to your for loop, I can't tell what's happening in that for loop. Where does your function start? Where does your function end? What's happening inside the for loop? What's happening outside the for loop? And so if you get your indentation fixed there, you'll find that understanding what's happening inside the for loop and outside the for loop will be very helpful.
And indentation, can it affect the output of the code?
It doesn't in JavaScript. There are languages like Python that don't use curly braces, and they only read the indentation of your code. So it doesn't matter in JavaScript, but I can tell you if someone submitted this code to me as someone who hires people, I would throw their application out and go on to the next developer, because indentation is that important for being able to read code.
Yeah.
And even when I'm helping you guys later on in the program, when you're working on more advanced things, I won't be able to help you find your error until you get your indentation right. And as soon as we fix the indentation, my eye will immediately go to what's missing.
Yeah, I'm really good with indentation in HTML, but some of this I like copy paste, look to see what it was, or I tried to look at Slack and replicate it, and everything just was kind of indented already.
So when we look at something like this, you've got a new curly brace here. So whenever you get a new curly brace, all of this code should be indented one level deeper.
Oh, okay.
Right. So that's the rule. And I don't know that that's ever been explicitly said to you, but whenever you have a curly brace, you have to indent that one level more.
Yeah. And in the case,
now that we are done all of that, we've got to match the indentation. So this curly brace is right here, right? So this line is actually telling you that this curly brace needs to be moved over.
Oh, it's not over here. It's
okay. Yes. Okay. So now when we look at your code, can you tell me what code is happening inside the loop? And can you tell me what code is happening inside your function?
All right. Let's see here. Well, I personally would make some blank lines between two, because I'm a believer in white space.
Yeah, so basically what's happening is because all of this code is indented a level deeper, you can figure out, oh, this for block stands on its own, right? So because all of this is indented, you know all of that is happening inside the for loop.
Okay.
When you look at where that ends, your function ends. So this curly brace lines up with this curly brace. And why do we know that? Because this line comes straight down.
Yes.
Problem is we can now look at this list inner HTML and realize that that should be happening inside your update HTML function.
So this guy, whoops. Well, see, it just indented everything.
Yeah, it's because I think, yeah, so here's your problem. We go up to the top. You have your function edit button pressed, and then no closing curly brace.
function, button press, index, da, 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 da. And it should, oops.
So it can't collapse just these 3 lines of code because you're missing your
'Cause-
closing curly brace there.
Or it's this one that needs to be over.
No. This one opens. Now, when we call the function edit button press, do we also want the function delete button press and update HTML to be a part of that?
No.
No. Edit button press is its own
Okay.
function. And the only 3 things we want it to do are in there.
Okay.
So we need a closing curly brace right here.
Why did this indent? I didn't actually do that. It was all indented.
Because your curly braces are wrong. So without it having the right curly braces, it's going to try and indent things. It can't know. And so now you've got this extra one here because that was closing this out. So go ahead and delete that. One more delete. Okay, now you can indent that to the right level. So just highlight all of it and hit Shift Tab. Okay, now all of a sudden things are lining up. My edit button press is these 3 lines of code. My delete button press is these 3 lines of code.
Mhm.
You see all of a sudden how you can easily go, oh, add new task. Those 5 things are happening. And then the curly brace closes out. If we keep going down, now you can highlight, we've got an extra curly brace there. So go ahead and delete that. And now we can highlight everything in here and Shift Tab it.
Including the ending curly brace?
Yep. Okay. And now all we need to do is, okay, so that's all lining up. Really, all of these should be indented one more tab level over. And if you highlight all 3, yep, and then hit tab once, there you go.
Oops.
And then that curly brace, yeah. Okay, so now move that over one more, hit delete once.
To the left?
Yes, delete there. Okay, so now when we look at this function, we can go function update HTML between this curly brace and this curly brace. Everything is indented exactly 1 level. So we easily now can tell this update HTML is going to run this code whenever we call update HTML. But for the for loop, we can easily see all of this is going to execute every time we go over this for loop because we've got our curly braces indented properly and the code inside of it indented properly. So indentation is one of those things that is a pain in the ass to fix. But if you do it as you're coding it out, don't worry about, oh, I'm going to fall behind. Get your indentation right, because your indentation down the road will come back to bite you. You won't be able to find the errors unless it's lined up.
Yeah. So what was happening was the braces were, and then when I was moving, it was doing indenting on me too, some of it. So I get that now. Question 2, between let HTML to update and for const index, should there be an extra line there or should it all be together? Just for
it's totally personal preference.
Okay. Because I like white space or black space as this case may be.
Yes. I personally would have the code written exactly as it is right now.
Okay.
I wouldn't add any additional spacing, but that's just a personal preference.
Okay. So this seems to be lined up. This guy should be here. And this one is this one.
Yep.
And that seems to be indented okay. Back on this one with the, when we broke it up by lines with the list item and colon in the index to all that. Shouldn't that all be kind of indented with the list item and flush with the HTML update plus?
Yes. Yes,
Or should it be indented? Should everything?
that's you could indent 33 through 35 one more level if you wanted to.
Okay,
Not 36 though, just 33 through 35.
excuse me.
And 33 as well.
Now I can sleep tonight.
Okay, that's how I would have it.
Yeah, I'm very picky about this stuff, actually. So that might be what my problem was. So let's see what's going on in the browser or,
Sure.
all right, so let's test it out. My first to-do item right now, tomorrow, is to secure inventor, even though I can't spell it. All right, and I want to edit it just for the fun.
Okay, so now you've got edit button pressed did is not defined.
Oh. Okay. It's not defined.
So let's go to our on click
In the,
in the update HTML function.
Yeah. all right. Oh, there we go. All right. On click, edit. All right. This guy.
Okay, so we've got our delete button pressed and our edit button pressed did.
You know, I caught one of those, but I didn't catch the other one. Oh, boy. Okay. Try it.
Sure.
Here. And then,
Delete is the only other one. And you could try to
Yeah.
reset.
so but I don't like update up here. It's just, it's being read out there. So, oh, want to do reset first or delete?
Sure, doesn't matter.
So
Okay,
how
so-
do I know it reset?
It would clear the list. So let's go to your reset
Oh.
function.
I'm in violation.
Yeah, don't worry about that.
Oh, I'm such an innocent person. I can't believe it. Which function are we doing again?
Reset to do's down at the bottom.
Right.
So all of that looks right. So let's go to your index.html and go to your reset button, reset to do's.
I might not have gotten added yet.
It's there. What are those parentheses doing? They are just hanging outside that quote, aren't they? On the reset button.
Oh, goodness gracious. My heavens. There is a gremlin in my machine. That's what Gus said. Okay, stop it.
And then you need your closing arrow that accidentally got deleted after that quote.
Button and button.
Right here, you need a right pointing arrow.
Oh,
Between the
closing.
quote. Yeah.
A closing.
Yeah.
Bracket there.
All right, save
Enter
that.
bracket. Yep.
And go ahead and add something. And then click reset. And that worked. Okay, go ahead and add it back. And click delete. And okay. And that worked as well. So you're good to go.
My goodness. Now I just have to kind of digest what we did. You're very helpful, though. I mean, you're a born teacher. I'm telling people that, you know, a lot of all the instructors are great, but it's like, you really know this stuff. You really love to teach it, and you're really good at teaching it. Thank you.
No problem.
I may be knocking on your door for the back end mentor.
Latonia, what do you got?
Thank you. Let's see.
Thank you. So I figured out why mine wasn't deleting. I had missed the parentheses on my update HTML. And I was hoping you could just explain again what those parentheses are doing, why we put them right there.
So the parentheses tell the function to execute. So otherwise it's kind of like when you say var num equals, or when you say const num equals 5. Right? If you just were writing your JavaScript code out and you just said num, you're like, num, what do you mean num? What would you like me to do with the number? Do I console log it? Do you want me to add it to something? Like, what do you mean num? And so the same thing goes for the function. When we say function update HTML, and then we put all of that code in the curly braces, when you say update HTML, it's like, what about update HTML? What would you like me to do with it? And so adding the parentheses are what's saying, oh, you would like me to execute that function called update HTML. You would like me to actually run the code that's inside of that function. And so we add the parentheses, but the parentheses also make it so we can add in parameters. And so the parentheses serve two purposes. One is to tell JavaScript, not only do I have this function named this thing, but I would like you to actually run the code that is in that function. And then I may have some additional information called parameters that I would like to pass into that function. And so not only am I telling you to execute it by putting the parentheses there, but if I put something inside those parentheses, I would like to be able to access them inside the function as well. All right, we've got a couple stragglers on. Any questions? All right, I will see you guys tomorrow.